everyone, and welcome to this talk on understanding the VC landscape, or as I like to nickname it, unicorn or die. So, first things first, hands up any founders in the audience. I know you've done this a million times, getting tired arms, tired feet, beautiful. Hands up any investors. Few of you, okay, founders pay particular attention to who to chase down. They've already taken down their hands, they knew that was coming. So, who among you, confession time, has been on a dating app and been ghosted? It's not just me. Don't make me do this on stage. Come on. Okay, if you haven't been on a dating app and been ghosted, at least some of you must have heard that tragic phrase, "It's not you, it's me." Hands up if you've been on the end of that in a dating relationship. You're all liars, or you're all just much better at dating than I was. Hands up if you've had that same scenario with investors, founders in the room. You've been ghosted, or you've been fobbed off with something that sounds like, "It's not you, it's me." Few more of you willing to admit to that one. We had a couple of investors in the room. I'm curious for the investors in the room. Who here has received an overwhelming number of startup applications? So many, and in spaces that maybe don't quite relate to what you say you invest in or aren't the right stage. And the human part of you has wanted to go back to each of those founders and tell them why you're not investing in them, but practically you just don't have the time. Any investors been in that situation? Yes, every investor, thank God, put up their hands. So this session is not about hating on venture capital, and it's not trying to put founders off VC either. But I've seen time and time again that founders feel like VCs don't have empathy with them. And I think that can be true, but I think it goes both ways. As founders, all too often we forget that VCs have their own business models, their own investors to answer to. You don't go to a cafe and take your own picnic and then get confused when they're really unimpressed with you. But time and time again, founders are going to VCs and behaving in a way that they're never going to respond to. My name is Hattie Willis, and I've been coaching and training startups for the last 8 years. In that time, I have trained thousands of founders and spoken to hundreds of investors. And I've seen a heartbreaking pattern emerge. Founders go for funding too early, or they approach the wrong investors because they're told by everyone, you have to reach out to hundreds to get a chance of success. And all too often, we focus on investment as the validation, not just of our business, but of ourselves as founders. So today, I want to give us a 101 session on how venture capital works and how that needs to change how you approach fundraising if you want to increase your chances of success. I also want to challenge some of you to question whether VC is the right path for you. Because while it can be an incredible driver of success, I am thoroughly fed up with us all pretending that it is the perfect path for every startup, or that not being VC backable is an insult. So what is the VC business model? I thought we'd build one together on stage, a little fund exercise. We're going to build a fund together, and as my name is Hattie, we're going to call it the Hat Trick VC. So first up, where are we going to get the money? Are there any multi-millionaires in the audience who would like to invest in my fund today? No? Okay. So this is the first question anyone wanting to start a fund needs to ask themselves. Firstly, who is going to back me? And secondly, why? Just the same questions you're asking yourself as a founder, hopefully, before you go and raise investment. Now, I want to create a big fund, which means I need big funders. So I'm going to go to ultra high net worths, and I'm going to go to people who are investing as an institution other people's money. So why do they do this? Betting on startups is incredibly risky. I'm sure I'm not the first person to tell you this. So investors in funds do so because they believe in this motto: to get the high reward, I need to take a big risk. but they are deciding where to put their money based on safer options as well. So VCs are having to convince them to put in money against things like stocks and shares that can deliver more stable returns. So when we go and pitch our fund, we're going to be pitching three things. Firstly, a winning thesis. Give me a wave if you've heard the term thesis used about VCs before. So a thesis is essentially where investors go to, where fund investors go to who they want to take money for, and they pitch. What is our vision for the future, and which startups do we believe are going to succeed in it? That might be based on industry, vertical, often tied to stage. That is where we're going to put our money. The second thing we're going to be pitching is that high risk, high reward element. How much of a return am I going to promise you to get you to part with your money at the beginning of the fund? And finally, when am I going to give you that money back? Because that matters. The longer I'm taking your money for, the higher the return I have to give you to compete with those safer options. Most funds will do this on around a 10-year timeline. So Hattrick VC has promised big returns. We're going to raise $100 million into our fund. And we're targeting a $300 million return in 10 years. By the way, for anyone thinking this is big, 3 times return is probably on the lower end at the moment. So I'm being quite conservative, promising $300 million for $100 million in. So time to build our portfolio. We're under pressure to deliver these big returns. How are we going to do it? As startups are so risky, we simply shouldn't put it all on one bet. What we need to do is diversify our portfolio, which I'm sure you've all heard before, spread our bets across a number of startups. Let's say we have enough money to back 10 startups. The way VCs will do this is they'll back 10 startups at the beginning, and then they will ruthlessly decide in the next stage of funding, who are they going to follow on? Who will they fund again? It's really important to remember this, because I've seen a lot of startups die when they go down the VC model. They take venture capital funding at the beginning, and then they get put on a growth trajectory that means they're burning cash super fast. And if they then can't raise the next round of VC money, they're in trouble. So we're going to bet on 10 startups, and we're going to follow on with a limited number in the next round. So 10 years passes. How have we done? I know you're all excited for my brilliant fund that no one invested in, and I will remember that. Luckily, we have had one huge success. One of our companies became a unicorn. Woo! It's valued at over $1 billion, and crucially, it exited in the timeline that we care about. So within that 10 years, it not only got valued at $1 billion, but it also exited for $1 billion. I want to pause here because I think this is something founders are told a lot, but maybe don't quite get. To be interesting to a VC, you really have to be a unicorn. If I'm betting on 10 companies, many of those companies will die. That is the startup law of nature. Many of them might return a small amount that can't move the dial on trying to return $300 million. So I need to bet on every single one of my startups that I invest in that they can return that entire $300 million. That 1 in 10, which is about the success rate for startups, will deliver. And this is why VCs care about unicorns. Because if you're not delivering them a unicorn company, you're really not moving the needle on them returning to their investors. And this is why they're obsessive about understanding how big you could get. It's also why VC-backed startups have to keep raising. Another myth I commonly see is that you can raise once from VC and be done. Doesn't that sound nice? The truth is, those VCs, because they need you to become billion-dollar companies, will need you to keep getting money for that rapid growth. And you're trying to become a billion-dollar company in that 10-year time period. That is fast. So you're going to have to raise on average every 18 months. And again, if your VC decides not to follow on to the next round, and that is the kind of behavior they do for startups they're excited about, it is a signal to the market and other investors that you are not delivering. And it makes it really hard to raise again. and at the burn rate, or the amount of money they've convinced you to spend to try and get that growth, it's then really hard to survive. So really important to understand the trajectory this puts you on. Now, on my podcast, one of my favorite guests was founder turned VC, Zoe Pedden. And I love how she puts this. Once you start on the treadmill, taking from external investors, particularly VCs, you're going to have a price tag. You need to sell. You need to grow at a relentless pace. So, do you fit the VC model? Please do not waste your time pitching to VCs if you don't fit it. It's a waste of everyone's time, but particularly, I'm protective of the founder's time. There are 3 prerequisites for VC. Firstly, a big enough market. If you're going to be a billion-dollar company, you're going to have to serve a lot of people. Do the VCs believe that there are enough people in the space you're trying to sell to, and that you can get enough market share to be able to reach that billion-dollar valuation? Secondly, I mentioned that rapid growth. If you're going to get to a billion-dollar valuation in 10 years, as a rule of thumb, by the end of that 10 years, you need to be making $100 million annual recurring revenue. To get there, you are going to have to grow so fast. And that final point, exciting traction. If you go to a VC too early, before you have the traction to convince them, particularly if you're a first-time founder, you are going to struggle to get them on board in the first place. So you're wasting your time if you're asking for money now. But the other question I really don't believe we're asking enough, and a big part of our mission at If We Raise, is does the VC model fit you and what you want as a startup? Quick thought experiment. If you had a 0.00006% chance of a £300 million personal exit, that's the money you keep after you sell your company, or a 10% chance of a £3 million exit, what would you take? Hands up for the 0.00006% chance. Okay, that looks like 3 people in the audience should consider VC, and everyone else should probably not. Go back to your why. If you started a company because you want to be your own boss, because you wanted to manage your stress and well-being and choose your own lifestyle, you want to work with people you just find it fun to be around, VC is probably not the path for you. If it was about maximizing the impact, and to do that you need to reach huge scale, or because you want to risk it all for that massive payback at the end, or you just think it sounds like a really fun roller coaster to be on, VC might be a brilliant path. As Zoe puts it, it is amazing. There is nothing like it, but you must be prepared for the toll on your health and your private life. The other myth and misconception, if you care about being your own boss and owning your own destiny, VCs can fire you. If they get enough control in the company, they can, and often do, fire founders when they no longer believe you're the right person to grow the business. So if that's a massive motivator, beware. To VC or not to VC is therefore the question. I spend a lot of my time at If We Raise talking about these 3 paths. Bootstrapping, which is where you're not taking external investment, but you're using things like grants, loans, or bringing early revenue into the company. Angel investment, which is individual investors putting in their own money and hopefully bringing experience and network too. And venture capital. What I encourage every founder to do is to question which of these is the best fit. And if you want venture capital, think about using the other 2 to get you there. It acts as a stack. Take inspiration from other journeys as well. Hanks is a beautiful example. They're a sexual health and well-being company that started by selling condoms. When they tried to raise VC, not only did they hit some horrific comments, including being asked by male investors to please demonstrate how to put a condom on, I kid you not, but they struggled to close their VC round. Luckily, they took in $1.8 million in angel investment, and it hasn't slowed them down. They're now stocked in most major retailers in the UK. Design My Nights founder Nick Telson worked backwards from the exit that would be exciting to him. He wanted a $25 million exit in something like 5 years. He worked out the metrics he needed to get there, took just £500,000 of angel money, and owned a big enough share of the pie that 25 million exit was huge for him. And finally, MailChimp, which many of us know and love, took no money from external investors, grew to $800 million in revenue and a $10 billion valuation before they exited with no external capital. I've put up a little helpful resource. I suggest you all take a photo now. I encourage you all to take time to compare the different paths of funding. Think about how long each is going to take you to raise. Think about the control you'll keep in the company, how you'll distribute profits, the ultimate size you can grow to, speed of growth, and whether you have to exit and at what scale to be a success. I also have 5 tips. If you do decide to raise VC, please be specific on the VCs you go to. Make sure you align with that thesis they've sold their investors. Build relationships around ahead of when you're trying to raise. I know I said don't go to them too early. This is different. You're not asking for money now. You're getting to know them, understanding what milestones matter to them. Focus on delivering that early traction. Selling to customers, at the moment, definitely helps you sell to investors too. And do your own due diligence on the VCs as well. Don't be afraid to ask questions as a founder. And finally, do think about raising from angel investors first. If you're just using VC because it feels like the quickest way to get as many checks in as possible, that big number, and you don't want to hunt down hundreds of angels, then look at things like angel syndicates. I'm actually working on something called Angel Syndicate, which is trying to help more angel syndicates, groups of angels, to spin up and make it easier for founders to apply once and access more funding. Come talk to me if you're interested in that later. And if you want more help developing your fundraising strategy, getting early traction before you go after investors, building with a community of founders who aren't exclusively chasing VC, then get in touch with us at If We Raise. We have multiple courses from fundraising to getting first customers to personal founder branding, which is becoming increasingly important to get investment and customers, and a membership that has things like office hours with myself and my co-founder, Tim, access to a group of angel advisors who are particularly interested in supporting underrepresented founders, and Ask Me Anythings with investors and growth experts. And if you want to hear more like this, funding tips, challenging ways to think about the funding landscape, and when we're dropping our new courses, then do subscribe to our newsletter at If We Raise. I'd also love to connect with any of you on LinkedIn that want to talk more about this. As you can tell, I've already gone over time. It's definitely a topic I'm passionate about. Thank you for your time today. And don't go with VC as default, please.